Making a game in 10 days? No problem. Learning how to make a game in 10 days? Now that's a little bit more of a problem. Hey, hi, hello, I'm Lemon Inc., or aka Just Lemon, and I'm a newbie video game developer with a plethora of hobbies and interests that keep me chronically online. So, let's start, shall we? I am no stranger to game dev. At least, now I'm not. But when I entered this little game jam competition known as Velox Fabula 2, you could see that game dev and I were acquaintances. Friends of a mutual friend, if you will. To put it simply, we could coexist in a group, but leaving us alone together would only lead to a lot of awkward small talk. But you gotta start somewhere, and start somewhere I certainly did. So today I'll be looking back on my first solo dev project, the ups, the downs, what I'm proud of, what still haunts me to this day, and where I hope to take it in the future. The future? Oh yeah, did I mention that I don't intend to just leave this game be in its game jam grave? Well, there you go. So, Velox Fabula. It's a game jam hosted by Robo Barbie and Ali Vera, both of Blooming Panic fame, in which you are given 10 days to make a game from a community-voted theme that's revealed at the beginning of the jam. This time's theme being, dun 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 dun, drumroll please, you shouldn't be here. Interesting. Very interesting. Definitely something that stumped me going in. Immediate thoughts gravitated to horror of unwelcome monsters and unplanned forays into the dark scariness, both of which I immediately ruled out because Mother did not raise a girl who follows the first thing that comes to mind. So what does that leave then? You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. Change the tone and it's a completely different prompt entirely. You shouldn't be here. You don't deserve to be in this situation. Justice has in some way wronged you and left the natural order to fall out of whack. You shouldn't be here. Idea number 1, a fallen angel. So my first idea took this theme as its main statement, something that is narrated to the player in a second-person point of view. Something's clearly gone wrong because you, an angel, a pure and holy little thing, have fallen to where you shouldn't be, exposed to things you've never been meant to see. A death of innocence, a feeling of betrayal, a bitter wake-up call to the world below paradise. I should take the time now to mention that I'd been suffering from horrid creative block, especially art block, so my doodles here are sparse, if you could even call them that. Instead, what I came up with that night was a little music sample. Note, I am not a musician, or have any musical talent, and as such, should not have any expectations connected to my person. So anyways, the next morning I woke up, gave it some good, hard thought, and immediately scrapped the idea. Yeah, this was a game jam after all. No time for crappy ideas or hard committing to something from day one. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it didn't, so I left it. Next slide. Idea number 2, Swan Lake. So I've had this idea floating around in my mind in the past, one I've fondly kept in my back pocket for years, that being my love for Odile, a character from the beloved classic, Swan Lake, as well as the much-beloved adaptation which inspired me, Barbie Swan Lake. Yes, I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world, and perhaps life would indeed be fantastic if I were plastic. But anyways, Barbie Swan Lake, let us circle back to the topic at hand, this damn game jam. Phase 1, preparing. All good things start with a plan. And so do many mediocre and bad things though, but you get my drift. If I was going to make a game, I needed to make a game plan. Now, there's some time leading up to the game jam which can be used to prepare. Not in terms of making the game, of course, but things like checking out possible themes, making teams, and actually learning the Ren'Py engine. I firmly, and stupidly enough, intentionally decided to do none of these things and go in blind because I really can't remember. It was the principle of the matter. But once the theme was announced and I settled on my chosen topic, I set to work planning things out in this little application known as Obsidian. Basically, it's a souped-up notes and more app. Really cool, really nice, really fun. I know, despite my in-depth pitch and known internet notoriety, I am not sponsored. Why Obsidian, you may be asking, and to that I say, because it looked cool and I love me a good organization app. Notion, Milanote, etc., etc. I gobble those babies up like a hungry hippo, and Obsidian was the same. Figuring I needed something to organize my writing and not wanting to turn to Google Docs, I say as I type the script in Google Docs, I thought, why not? And opened it up. Blah blah blah, type, notes, here you go. Oh, I forgot Anastasia from Cinderella 3 was also inspo. Neat. Now, pros. The app is neat. I like the aesthetic, formatting transfers well into Visual Studio Code, and its tabs and wiki like linkage were ahead of the game. Cons. I'm a pleb, so I have the free version and can only access it from one place, that being my computer. So if I was out and about with any other device that had it, I was shit out of luck in terms of using it for its purpose. But that's fine. Maybe one day I will be rich, or better yet, employed, and I will be able to spend all the money I want on Obsidian. Back to the story. Phase 2. Writing. So the original outline goes as such. Ominous phrasing, I know. Play through the perspective of Odile, a creature who feeds on the love and emotion given to her by others. I wasn't supposed to read that. I love My Little Pony changeling concepts. As she plays the part of Princess Odette's younger sister, the only maiden of her court who managed to escape being turned into a swan when the princess rejected the advances of an evil sorcerer known as Rothbart. Little do they know, though, that she is not the girl she claims to be, and is in fact the sister of Rothbart, whose parents used her to replace the original younger princess years ago. Follow her through her perspective of a loose adaptation of the events of Swan Lake, and be the ultimate deciding factor in whether the cuckoo bird falls or flies from the nest. The plan was to have 3 acts with multiple scenes each, spanning around 3 days before the dance and climax occur, and 4 different endings. Let me just cut to the chase and say I'm sure you've suspected it already. I did not do this. I, for the life of me, could not find it in myself to stick to my writing schedule, and was instead much more taken with the idea of playing with Ren'Py's GUI. What I ended up eking out was 4 very rushed chapters, especially towards the end, and 2 rushed, fever dream endings I wrote within the hour of the game as a whole being due. So yeah, not a good look, but I got what I deserved. Let's just summarize the story. Spoilers for anyone who may be interested in playing the Ugly Duckling version of it. Go ahead and do that, because I may dog on it, but it's my game. Play my game, please. Scene 1. Dawn. Day has just barely dawned as Odile makes her way down a familiar pathway in the woods. Enter Rothbart, her brother and resident evil sorcerer, as he makes his rounds to ruin her morning. Yes, these 2 are siblings in this version because I am the law and reality is as I speak it. He tells her his lack of luck with the ladies and warns that the court of transformed swans grows more elusive by the day. She retorts that it's probably because he's a freak. They continue to have a friendly chat that makes Odile feel faintly as though she wants to hurl, and now satisfied with the strife he's caused, Roth makes his way to leave, pausing to deliver some last words of wisdom on his way out. Anyway. Scene 2. Sunrise. Odile, thoroughly shaken up by her brother, continues on her significantly less than merry way to the lake where the transformed ladies of Odette's court reside, basket of delicious little treats in hand. As expected, they are nowhere to be seen at first, but are eventually lured out by the temptuous offerings of olive bread that Odile has brought with her. Whilst they spend time gobbling, Odile takes a moment to reflect on her nature as a changeling, a creature that assumes others' forms to leech off the love afforded to the original counterpart, and how exactly she even came to be Princess Odile. One round of birdbrain level banter later, and Odile finally manages to inquire on the whereabouts of her sister, Odette. There's a bit of pushback, but Miss Mastermind Manipulator isn't easily cowed and eventually gets what she's looking for. This scene was tough to write. Not as in it was hard per se, but I didn't want to write it, and I can easily attribute most of the time that was wasted to being because I didn't want to write it. I honestly don't remember why I had such a vitriolic reaction, but it's done and dusted now. Scene 3, noon. Just as the Swan Maiden said, Odette is found under the willow, a swan to all eyes but those of Rothbart and Odile. She's looking pretty blue on approach, and for good reason. Rothbart's a total scumbag. For once, ever since being with her brother, Odile feels a bit uncomfortable, possibly due to the supposed close proximity she has to confront every time she's with Sister Dearest. Being with Odette is like donning a set of retainers, uncomfortable, but fittingly familiar to fall into rhythm with. Regaining some of her mojo, Odile pokes a bit of fun at Odette's midnight rendezvous with a certain prince, although Odette does her best to deny it, finally settling on the current situation as justification for not wanting to get her hopes up. Odile, ever the narrative explainer, then sheds some light on a deal made by her egotistical brother and Odette, in which the prince's declaration of love will decide the outcome of her fate. It's tough, it's tragic, it's just as planned. Starting to get a tummy ache from all these yucky mixed-up feelings, Odile loses it a bit in front of Odette, who unknowingly worsens the flames as she comforts her. Silly Odette! Okay, now it's really time to see where corners were cut and rushes were made, because I combined two separate scenes that weren't even next to each other in scene order for this. Yeah, I don't know if you could tell, I'm being sarcastic, but that last part was quite rushed, wasn't it? Originally, this scene was much more minor, setting up Odile and Odette's relationship before moving to an uncomfy home scene with Odile and Rothbart, then maybe having some prince action and going to another day where these emotions could finally boil over. But dawn of the final day had come, and so we ended up getting none of that and all of this. Whoopsie. Scene 4, sunset. Time skip for no reason previously explained in particular. The evening has come, and with it begin celebrations meant to help find the future princess of the resident kingdom our cast reside in. Rothbart and Odile are there, with Odile looking positively not herself, much to her brother's sick enjoyment. Gross. They go over the plan, that being for Odile to impersonate the lovely maiden the prince has fallen for, aka Odette, and get him to confess his love for her, thus winning them the deal, securing happy endings for both siblings at the cost of others. However, Odile isn't seeming quite so enthusiastic. Unfortunately for them, the crowd is much more wild than expected, and they are promptly separated. Saved by the skin of her teeth, Odile looks to see the stranger that helped her, only to find Prince Siegfried himself, aka the prince they gotta hoodwink. He acts all blushy and cutesy because as far as he's aware, he's just stumbled into his crush, while Odile has a mental breakdown. From here, you get a choice that determines which of the two endings you get. Fly or fall. Remember how I said the last scene suffered from squishing and cuts because of it being the dawn of the final day? Well, I wrote this within the hour of submission time, the hour where I also learned how to build and submit things to itch. So yeah, it was bad. The endings, which I won't go into too much here, were basically streams of consciousness transferred straight into Renpai. Poor Siegfried. The OG Prince Charming's laugh at his screen time and characterization. Odette doesn't even show up, and let's just say there were big plans for her that had to be cut for time. Phase 3. Art and GUI. Okay, now here we are at the one part where I had a semblance of an idea of what I was doing, even if I was in a major art block rut. Hopefully the visuals of my speed paint so far have been entertaining. So let's start with GUI for simplicity. This was my first foray into the workings of a GUI, but I'd call it more of a toe dip considering how in-depth my next project would be. I used Renpai's base default GUI as a reference, so I wouldn't need to move much around, aside from a few minor text fixes here and there. What it really came down to was reskinning, and oh boy did I reskin that baby. In the time I could have been using to maybe write more of a coherent story, I spent agonizing over text box transparency. I couldn't help it. I wanted whimsy and pastels, damn it. I also, for some strange reason, had this rule I'd committed to, where I could only use one main brush, that being the Feast ice cream pencil, if I remember correctly. So at the very least, everything was consistent in its sort of sketchiness. Speaking of consistency, I stuck to a black, white, blue, and purple color palette for all the GUI to go with the white versus black swan theme, if that makes sense. Now, moving on to art. Sprites, let's blaze through these babies. We started off with Odette. Lovely Odette. For the most part, I based these costumes off of the ones performers would actually wear, as well as Barbie and vibes. In Odette's case, that meant a whole lot of white, sort of holographic feathers that formed a sexy little ballerina number. Combine that with the wide doe eyes, a modest braided do, and a hint of black hair to both parallel Odile and also call back to the, what's it called again? Basil knob. A callback to the basil knob, of course. Next up was Rothbart, whose main notes were just to make him look like a sickly pretty boy, almost Luciferish in his guile. Of course, since he's a whore, we have to have his pectorals out and shining, and I added a little owl feather side cape and earrings to add not only to his evil slayness, but also because of its predator symbolism. Finally, I changed up his color to red, and gave him a little pattern action to help him fit in with the gang, and pay homage to some of the costumes I found while surfing the web. Finally, we have Siegfried. His design changed the most from concepts, and was the one I was the most unsure of. I ended up calling it a day on his hair and just giving a symmetrical chop that will no doubt show up in my other games, like I'm Don Bluth. His outfit, however, had much more care put into it, and I once again tried to mix a variety of Siegfried outfits I'd found online. If you couldn't tell, his color is green. Odile didn't get a sprite, unfortunately. The one that shows up is just an edited Odette sprite with its blues exchanged for Rothy's reds. That's just how the cookie crumbles. Side note on the backgrounds. I had the foresight to know that I was not going to have time to make the backgrounds myself, so I pulled a take this available picture, edited a little, slap on some texture, and profit. That's all I have to say on that. Phase 4. Sound. Okay, so for the most part, I outsourced my music post-jam to a Music Box Classics YouTube channel, whose link will be in the description. Check them out, they're amazing. Unfortunately though, during the jam period, I once again made questionable time management decisions and produced my own menu track, which was of course very amateurish, and had the entire rest of the game simply loop to the same Music Box cover of Swan Lake. Yeah, I got an earful for that one. Lesson learned. I'm a lover of music, but not a master, so I don't have the most know-how when it comes to explaining my musical choices. All I can say is that I went for something that sounded tragic and used instrumentals I associated with the sounds of Barbie, Swan Lake. If you were ever curious what's been playing, well, it's the track. Do with that info what you will. Phase 5. Implementation and Programming. There honestly isn't much to say for this section. I had one previous round of experience inputting a script in RenPy from when I tried it out months ago, and that was basically it. Cue me scrambling to input everything, which wasn't too bad, a few missed errors aside. I don't think I would honestly have that much trouble if I didn't save it until literally the last second to do, so I think overall, not too bad. There are some things I wish I could have fixed, like having the menu and the game menus sort of separated, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. Aside from the title cards and character transforms I implemented, this was not a complex programming project. You'll have to like and subscribe for one of those. But yeah, that's the game I managed to push out in 10 days. Not great, riddled with spilling text and a singular stupid handful of bugs, and the same loop of Swan Lake repeated over and over again. But to quote the note I gave it in my library, a ragtag bundle of mud and sticks. But it's my ragtag bundle of mud and sticks. Phase 3. Outcomes and Reflections. I was so embarrassed upon hitting submit. I cannot stress how much I hated my game, which, if I continue to do retrospectives, will be a persisting theme. It was so janky, and going up against the amazing behemoths that were my jam mates, I felt so intimidated. However, as I played and commented and got my own plays and comments, I began to cheer up, and with a little minor but not perfect fix update, felt more confident. I mean, I learned how to make a game, and had a hand in all aspects in those 10 days. Even if the game was industry crap, it was my gold. So, why try to paraphrase any reflections now when I can read the entry I wrote post-game jam? Take it away! I've been pacing for days trying to figure out how to word my own post-mortem, so I guess this place is the best opportunity to narrow those rambles for a devlog, LMAO. As always, I cannot wrap my mind around any semblance of the good without first acknowledging the bad, and so we'll start with a big, I need to clarify every piece of information sticker that I so love. Motivations. So, this was my first real solo dev project. I've dabbled with interactive fiction and have had my hand in contributing to and leading other projects, but this was the first one published that I can say was solely me, and that I got to have a hand in creating at least some part of every aspect. Going into Velox with at least a good familiarity with pacing operations, I was already well aware that I was going to go in biting more than I can chew. That sounds crazy and full of self-sabotage copium, but hear me out. I think one of the biggest hurdles for me in doing anything new is that there's millions of possibilities and what-ifs running through my head at all times. I'll be in bed, lying awake at night, doing mental exercises on how would I code this, how would I implement this, how could I put a twist on this, etc. All of these, of course, building an intimidating mental monster that makes it feel impossible to do anything that is not pushing me to my limits, TM. Combine that with my late lack of passion, and you get one lethal serving of mind for any creative. So, of course, going into this, I started with a plan that was far grander than anything I could accomplish in the time of the jam. Having other work occupy me most days also was not a point in my favor, because all that mattered at the moment was just, I need to create something, without doubts of I'm not doing enough seeping into it. I went in with art block and writer's block, and while I can't say I don't still suffer from them, there's also that little shining light of, I can do this because I just did it. Take your victories as they come. Elephants in the room. Okay, so let's address what anyone who'd play the game in its current state would realize. It's a little messy. Pretty messy. UI has taken a step in a direction, but it could always be improved. The singular track of music I managed to slip in will condition you into madness by the end of Scene 1. There's oodles and boodles of grammar and spelling and punctuation errors. Plot was thrown into hyperdrive midway through Scene 3 to fit emotional beats in, which beat a little less when they get rushed, so, LMAO. The final scene and endings really show off that, oh, she did this in 15 minutes before submission time status. Overly large chunks of writing bleed out into the UI. I seem to find difficulty in keeping names straight, much to the regret of the Swan name mix-ups, and the Odile sprites that this build continues to vainly search for. Seems like even I'm guilty for blending these two OD sisters together. The code could get a little TLC in terms of minor errors and lack of variable implementation, a missing proper title logo, and there are sprites and CGs whose presence would greatly add to this feeling more like a full experience. Catch the excuse I subbed in, since I only had the sketch of Odette's swan sprite, lol. Besides that, there were other things I worked on that just didn't have time to be fully implemented in a way that would make sense. That was a really bad cough. Minigame segments. I'll come back for you. I can't say I love the art, since it's not my actual style. I fully went in thinking I was just going to make little dot-eyed guys, and I'm more of a fan of dynamic shots, but there are parts that pulled me out of my tortured artist slump, even if just for a moment. Wait, no positive things belong in the positive section. Anyways, with all that to say, do I think this game is a quality and polished experience that I'd stand by to represent what I'm capable of? Hell no. It's flawed as hell and runs like a car you left out all summer to melt, but it's my shabby car and I intend to stick by it, both at its lowest and its highest. Inspo and self-glazing. I think by now we get the I made something, woohoo, I broke that barrier positive mindset manifesting, so I'll graciously skip past it. Can I just say I love tortured lady freaks? My main idea going into this jam and theme was to try and be unique TM with how I interpreted the theme. I'm sorry to say, but those of us raised on Broadway, and especially Wicked, are damned to a continuous cycle of, okay, but consider this, whenever looking at villains. The Black Swan had popped up once or twice in my head due to my history with the BCU, more on that in a second, and the occasional dabbles of media making her the sad little Eponine, not that girl, losing dog. However, that didn't bring it to the forefront of my mind for this. No, it was the idea of parasites, especially brood parasitism, that got my brain gears turning. You shouldn't be here. You're an infiltrator, something causing damage to an environment not made for you. Look at the camouflaged egg of a cuckoo bird in a warbler's nest, how it pushes other eggs and chicks to their deaths to monopolize food and attention, and you can start to see the linings of our black swan. That, combined with my initial planned endings, if you succeed, builds the first half or root created by the prompt. Secondly, I wanted to do a zoom in on the character in question herself, Odile. Physically, to others, she shouldn't be there, but I also wanted to have her internally rocked by this. Her situation, her existence and dependence and need to get her hands dirty, to her none of it is fair. Why should she be born in a hunger that she believes can only be quelled by taking from others? Also, I must say, heavily inspired by MLP changelings. Shout out to my eternal pony muses. It's both a semi-valid and childish view depending on how hard you commit to it, because being born into such a situation without proper understanding and feeling demonized by doing what it takes to survive definitely isn't fair. But also, Odile is able to take this to extremes in a way giving into that starving mentality of, it isn't fair that everything that should be mine isn't mine, and I am better than all of this and can never be blamed for any of my actions. She's presented potential outs, but she's so blinded by envy and spite that she can't even see them. Womp womp. So, depending on your choices, the text explores these roots, helping to form Odile into a more genuinely tragic character, but also a very toxic and flawed person. I may be in her corner, but Odile definitely does not get a pardon for everything she does and thinks, even if you can trace the origin of those thoughts. And although I want to go in and flesh and pace this out more, I'm pretty proud of some of the choices I made to get this across. Dramatic bitterness is oxygen to my lungs. Aside from writing, I did have a fun time going back to mostly lineless art and making myself hard commit to using a single brush to make everything. While the style isn't something I'd fully recognize as mine, I'd say I enjoyed the clothing designs and the homages I paid to different production costumes, considering clothing and I are like oil and water. Not in a weird way. A final little fun tidbit is that all the swans in the court are named after Barbie movie protags. One must never forget their roots. It takes a village to raise a game jam. This has got to be one of the most cross-dev involved game jams I've been in, considering the voting system and the plentiful comments. While it is spooky for someone with the social chihuahua shakes like me, whose instinct is to lie belly up and clarify every little thing, it's also been so welcoming and fun. I've played games with topics and in formats I haven't really focused on before, and just seeing the unapologetic diversity in every aspect of all these devs and their creations is so motivating. Really helps with that they're going to throw tomatoes at me for daring to breathe fear that usually keeps me from commenting or posting. Not to mention, I feel like I've gained so many coding models that make Ren'Py that much less intimidating. An entry could have a character sprite performing a little move transform, and I'd be excitedly taking notes down in awe and admiration. Others' comments have also gotten me all puffed up and helped lessen that post-jam I need to be sent to the shame room with a paper bag as a mask for making this mental block. And I can say that I've definitely recovered a part of that passion that's been hibernating for the longest time. Really, all I've been able to think about is I can't wait for the next VF jam, and if luck is ever on my side, this won't be the last I see of the creators from this one. Little happy 3 face. Here are the ratings I ended up receiving. Not too bad for a first-timer. Phase 4. The future? Okay, now this part, unlike the rest, is not scripted. A, mainly because I didn't feel like typing anymore and I wanted to see if I could record this all in one take before my roommate got back. And B, because I don't have much to say other than I just want to make what I set out to make. I want to have minigames, I want to have more scenes, I want to show you all how shitty Rothbart is, and I want to make Odile the most poor, precious Pookie imaginable, and have a little more drama with the prince. So yes, while I'm not actively working on this right now, I'm currently busy with other matters, cough, villainess, cough, memento mori, I definitely want to get to this, maybe in the summer, when I am unemployed. So this is definitely not the last you'll see of this game. But I think just looking back and having this whole retrospective and having to type the script and make a video has really increased my sort of love for this game that, as you can see, did not exist prior. So if you're like me and you want to make a game but you feel like it's going to turn out like crap, maybe it will. It probably will turn out like crap unless you're a virtuoso. But who cares? You're going to make a game. And that, I think, is pretty cool. So, anyways, I'll see you around, hopefully with some more polished videos than this, and goodbye!